Hi there, it's Mike here. Just a quick note that we had a bit of technical difficulty in this episode, so around the 25-minute mark you might experience a bit of missing content. We apologize for that beforehand, and we hope to do better in the future. Let's get back to the episode. Welcome back to 40 Plus Fit, the podcast dedicated to helping you reclaim your health and vitality after 40. I'm your host, Mike, and today we're tackling a topic that affects almost everyone returning to fitness: gym pain. Is it a sign of progress
Pain,
or a
pain
red
and
flag?
body.
Joining us as always is Twain, our head coach, who has years of experience helping people over 40 navigate the complexities of exercise and aging. So, without further ado, let's jump into this topic of pain.
Awesome. I'm so sorry I jumped in halfway while you're doing the intro.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I think it adds authenticity to our podcast.
Yeah, for all of you listening, it really is a case where we don't actually prepare and script anything. So what you hear is what you get.
Yeah, no, what is it? Unfiltered thoughts.
Unfiltered thoughts. But yeah, I mean, speaking of pain, there's definitely a lot of unfiltered thoughts I can give you about pain and kind of discomforts in training. But I think maybe let's just kind of go with the questions that you have, because I think pre-recording we were discussing a little bit about some actual issues that you mentioned, right? That were
Yeah,
brought up to you by your friends and all.
right. So this is a topic that, one of the people that actually mentioned it was my wife, because we also all going through our fitness journey as over
Yes.
40s. And there's the case of, when you go in and you work out, and somewhere during your workout or the next day or however it is, you start to get a bit of pain. Like let's call it the usual, probably the most common journey that most people go on, and that is you go, you work out, and the next day the DOMS kicks in, right? So the
Mm.
DOMS is obviously the delay onset of muscle soreness. For those that aren't familiar with the term, the
Yeah.
stiffness that you get the next day from the workout. So then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
you you get that, and then you see in your schedule, hey, you got another workout planned for the day,
But
and
you
so
can
you
barely get off the toilet bowl or something, right? And everything.
correct, and so you think to yourself like, should I go in if I'm in so much pain? Should I go and work out? Or
Yeah.
maybe this is like my body telling me that I should take a rest, or all these kind of things. Or you actually make it back into the gym, and then you decide like, oh no, I have to go very light today because I don't want to injure myself further when I already have all this pain.
Yes.
So
That makes
perhaps
sense.
we can just talk today, and we try to differentiate between that expected pain that everybody's supposed to be going through versus what is an actual real concern of a pain that might arrive. And like, how can we tell the difference between these?
Yeah, I think that first point, or rather actually the last point that you just made about telling the difference, is probably the main key here.
Yes.
Um, what I've realized, especially after coaching for so long, and I myself having been training for so long, because I've been training since I was, what, 13 years old, I think, when I actually started doing a lot of body weight stuff and all that stuff. I mean, many young men do that, right?
Yeah.
But right now I'm trying to think, at least 20, basically more than 2 decades into doing this exercise thing. And what I've understood and learned from not just my own experience, but others, is that there's always going to be some level of discomfort you will experience from pushing your body. Okay. But there's also an incredible amount of exponential discomfort that comes with not pushing your body and not keeping it strong.
Mm.
And that's where, the ravages of age kind of comes in, right? We talked about this many times before in other episodes, but if you just let age do its thing and you don't keep up, the strength of your body, you will get a lot more chronic pains and discomforts. So it's kind of a pain is or discomfort is kind of inevitable as we go through the process of life. At least the physical pain and discomfort, is inevitable because the body will age at some point.
Mm.
But the trick here is you choose the kind of discomfort that you go through. Is it a manageable kind of normal discomfort that is part of the process of training and recovery, or is it a discomfort that finds you because of your lack of training and recovery? And I think learning how to differentiate, first of all, accepting that as the base part, allows you to actually let go of the idea of being completely pain-free. Because the low level noise of some minor discomforts here and there will not affect you. And you learn, and then you can move on to the next level of really saying, okay, let me start to really differentiate what is an acceptable kind of discomfort versus what's an actual pain. And so even though we name this episode pain, really, I do think pain itself, at least in this context, needs to be a little bit more specific and defined. And I would say that the pain that you should be experiencing, where it's a cause for concern, would be any kind of sharp or intense pain, okay, that occurs out of out of nowhere,
Mm.
or even immediately following an activity or while the activity is occurring. Of course, all these things will represent different causes for the pain, but if it's immediate and it's sharp, it's probably a really good sign that, okay, this thing is not normal, right? But if it let's say it's like a very mild discomfort, it's not sharp, it's a very dull ache, that's maybe quite intense. Let's say we were talking about DOMS and soreness, where it's delayed onset muscle soreness, that comes from the recovery process of having trained your muscles.
Mm.
That's one of those things where, hey, cool. I know this thing is painful at the moment, and maybe even doing some movements, it's painful, especially we use the example of leg day. Everybody that trains leg day the first time has trouble, maybe even just standing up from a chair the next day, right? Next couple of days. So understanding that that's part of the process, kind of going through these discomforts and just it's what we call growing pains, what I would classify as growing pains. So it's part of the process. And just going through the discomforts, you realize very quickly your body will adapt. And then this initial level of DOMS oftentimes doesn't resurface again. It just gets lesser and lesser, almost exponentially as the weeks go by. To the point where I actually have clients that always ask me, hey, you know what? I actually don't feel any soreness in my from training, even though I'm pushing hard, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting more reps, I'm doing all this stuff, but I don't feel any of this same soreness that I felt when I did it the first 1, 2 weeks. And you're like, yeah, cool. That means your body's adapted, and it's adapting well. Soreness again is not an indicator of like a good workout or anything. It's just an indicator that you're trying something different from what you're used to.
Mm.
Yeah. So I think learning how to differentiate these two, super important right at the start. What's a growing pain? What's an actual pain of concern? And I think the biggest way to differentiate it is just say, how sharp and intense is this pain? And then you go from there. Okay, when did it occur? How is it affecting you in terms of daily functionality? Because sometimes you can still do the movement, it just is uncomfortable, right? Again, standing up and down from the toilet, when you have quads and hamstrings that are super sore. Like right now, literally, as we're recording this, my glutes and my quads are sore, uh, you know, like nothing because I pushed them really, really, really hard 2 days back. So they're really hitting me right now.
Yeah, don't
Um,
worry. I'm in the same boat at the moment.
yeah,
Right. I want
yeah, but
to,
I think that's the first step, right? Yeah.
yeah, okay. I want to come back to recognizing the sharp pain a bit later.
Yes.
But for now, I also just want to ask, like as we age, how does the body's response change? Like we've mentioned here a few times now the term of DOMS, right? The
Yes.
stiffness that you get, and then the body's adaptability to the workouts that you're doing. Does this slow down as you age and it take longer for you to adapt, or is that not a moot point? It all really on an individual case.
Well, I think both points you brought up are actually true. It's just that um, technically, while you age, the idea in theory is that you will take longer to recover. But what I found in terms of practice is that if you take care of your recovery basics, you get enough sleep, you're getting enough protein specifically, and you're eating a decent amount of calories to at least maintain your weight. And yeah, I think you've got all the big basics in already. You layer into that stress management and stuff, your recovery will probably be the best that it can be. And you'll find that at least if you're not 60, 70, the the rate of recovery will be pretty much where like the max that it will be. So you're not likely to have lasting soreness for super long, more so than if you were younger. Yeah.
Okay. Right. The other one is that, as we also age, we find that sometimes getting off a couch is a little bit more difficult compared to when you were younger, all these kind of things.
Yes.
Not because of the strength issue, if you've been working out and increasing that, but
Yeah.
like you get a few more aches and pains that creep in here and there. Like a very common one that I know from my discussions with my friends and all that is we all tend to have a bit more of an achy back compared to when
Yeah.
we did when we were younger. So when you come to these kind of things, are there actually more types of pain that people over 40 will experience? Not just when they return to the gym, but also that they can understand that, this part of pain is likely a bit of aging, sign of aging, and we can
Mm.
maybe address this in the gym rather than shying away from it.
Yeah. My opinion on this actually has kind of evolved quite a bit. I would say initially when I was younger, I would just say, yeah, it's just an issue where you're not being very active, potentially you're not strong enough, things like that. But I think it's a lot um there's a lot more to cover there and a lot more variables to consider beyond just the person's not active. So let's say assuming you are already active, because that's still the baseline. If you're not keeping a certain level of activity, you're not using your muscles are not necessarily uh strong enough to kind of sustain any kind of movement or even just basic postures that you might be in for a while. But I do think once you got that baseline down, a lot of it comes down to just a few different things. One thing could be posturally. When you are in a position for a long period of time without shifting around, it can actually just make you feel stiffer because you kind of like get locked in a position and then you are maybe focusing on whatever else you're doing. And then that makes uh then it kind of makes your nervous system kind of down regulate a little bit. So in a way, your muscles I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this. It's not that your muscles turn off or anything, but it's kind of like your muscles are not as ready to spring into action, right? So it's kind of energy conservation kind of
Go into a
feel to
standby
it,
mode,
in a way,
like the
yeah.
TV.
So yeah, so that's usually kind of what happens. That's why we always talk about this as posture is a transitional thing. There's no such thing as really good posture or bad posture. If you can just stand there and be hunched over, but if I tell you, hey, are you able to kind of like stand upright a little bit more and you just are able to get into the position, then that's great. Like you can shift, you can shift and you can change. You can change your posture relatively well, then that's fine. It only becomes kind of an issue when we stay in the same posture for like super long periods of the day, cumulatively and at one go. So if you're in a working job, right, like a desk job or something, the whole day, right? Many of us work very hard, right? I'm pretty sure. So 12 hours, you're just in front of the computer, hunched over the computer in that position. Yeah, that can potentially put certain muscles in different positions that will make it feel very uncomfortable. But all of these are actually easily resolved the moment you actually go and do some sort of activity, and do some sort of strengthening. So I think that's the first thing about like posture and like stiffness. The other part about it also is that when you train, if you train hard enough, if your recovery is not optimized, you tend to feel, I would say, a lot of these aches and pains a little bit quicker, just because again, it's a lack of recovery in that sense. And when I say recovery, I'm talking not just about what you eat, but also how are you managing your stress, how are you managing your sleep. Okay, because these two things actually impact us a lot more. In fact, I would even go so far as to say right now that perhaps even stress management might supersede sleep as one of the major things that kind of impedes people's recovery. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the people that I talk to seem to be chronically stressed to the point where they accept that they are normal, but they don't realize that even though they can handle it, but their plate is still overflowing, right? And so that still creates a certain level of stress. I think chronic stress at that level is one of those things where that, yeah, it's just it's not great. It just kills, right? So yeah, so I think in that sense, all this stiffness that we feel, all these like postural issues, this lower back aches and pains, assuming you're already doing some sort of strengthening for them, you're already doing some sort of activity, the best areas to look out for is um, are you locked into a certain position for long periods of time? And are you also managing your recovery side of things? So are you managing your stress well? Are you always constantly anxious and stressed about things? Are you worrying about, what's going to be happening? And also, are you getting enough sleep? Because that's like the major parts of recovery that many people don't focus on. In terms of nutrition, you all know our stance on this. As we age and we get older, we need more protein. And protein is really the building blocks of just rebuilding all the structures in our body. So if you're getting a lot of joint aches and pains, there's a good chance as well that your joints themselves, tendons, tissues, all those structures uh, are being replenished at a good enough rate. Yeah, so make sure you get enough protein in. And yeah, I think pretty much you already are doing the most that you can. A lot of the immediate kind of relief options are also available, but those things are usually not long term. So you can, if you have like really severe back pain or something, it's probably a case where there might be things you can do to immediately relieve it first, and then there's things that you need to do on a daily basis to kind of make yourself feel better and slowly allow your body to strengthen up in a way that will not allow you to get so, not allow you to get into that same position again where you get all these pains.
I can give you an example from my side as well. Is that
Yeah,
I am quite desk bound in my kind of work that I do. And so what has happened over the years is my shoulders have actually slanted forward, right? So I get a bit of a, like a hunched back. And with this
yeah,
hunchback, I get a lot of pain in the shoulders as well as the back. There's a lot of tightness that happens in there. But you
yeah,
assume that this is just, going with age. So as you get older,
yeah,
it's just the age-related injury, well, not injuries, but age-related pains that you get with. And
yeah.
so working with Twain and working with some other people as well, they highlighted that this is one of the issues that I have. And luckily, there's actually things that could be done because one is that while I might be going to the gym and doing all kinds of presses, they are all focusing primarily on the front and the mid at most of the shoulders or the front of the body. And so it's building up that part there
Mhm.
and strengthening it, but it's completely neglecting the rear deltoids, which is like the muscle behind the shoulder. So that one is
Yeah.
very underdeveloped compared to the other parts of the muscle. And then there was another one that was highlighted to me when I went for physio for the recent shoulder injury that I had, where they did the tests and everything. They said, okay, your lats, which is like your back muscle on the sides,
Hmm.
is reasonably developed, but you're very underdeveloped in, I can't remember the name they gave, but it's like the muscle that supports the scapula uh, on either side of the spine in the upper back. And they're like, this is very
Like the
underdeveloped.
rhomboids or the lower traps or all that. Yeah.
I can't remember the name that they gave, but they said this is very underdeveloped. And I said, "Why God, very underdeveloped, you know? I've been in the gym for so long." And they're like, okay, try do these exercises. And they had me run through a few exercises there. And I tell you, I've never sweated so much and struggled. My arms were shaking and everything because of these exercises they gave. And in
Yeah.
theory, when you look at the exercise, it's like such a basic little exercise that you need to do. But because I was so underdeveloped in that region, it was so difficult to do.
Yeah.
So when I come and I talk about these age-related injuries, or not injuries again, age-related pains, I find that many of them, maybe not all, right, but many of them are lifestyle related. As you said, sitting in the
Hmm.
chair all day, you get very tight hip flexors, all these kind of things because of the position that you sit in. These
Yeah.
can actually be addressed when you go for a workout if you have a coach that actually knows what they're talking about rather than like a gym bro. Oh, you must work these muscles. Da, da, da." But I can actually
Yeah.
see, oh, right, this is your lifestyle. You're likely having these kind of issues. Okay, and I can address them in the gym. So when you go and if you're returning back from a long period out of the gym and you're returning back now, and you're considering getting a coach for these kind of things, make sure that you ask them these kind of questions that, are related to the injuries or the pain that you're experiencing to ensure that they come and give you the best plan going forward. So that is one that I just wanted to bring up. And so maybe you can elaborate a little bit more as to questions they can ask a possible trainer or, things that they themselves, if they don't have access to a trainer, how they can maybe modify their workouts slightly for these kind of things.
Um, yeah, I would say the maybe the first step there is like, yeah, if you actually have pain, example like you did in the shoulders, um, a large part of like the different areas of the body generally would be to do with, okay, how do the muscles around it kind of move those structures, right? So I give you an example for shoulders, it's all generally to do with how does your scapula move. For example, you mentioned those middle back muscles where you say, hey, they tell you it's underdeveloped and stuff. Um, and how does the scapula move? How freely can it move? How much can your ribs expand? How does your hips twist? Your pelvic bones, how do they actually twist? All these little things. And so that's why there's an infinite combination of different things that could be the issue for you. So I always recommend, number one, go and see a physical therapist for sure to get this diagnosed and assessed, right? First thing, so always get diagnosed and assessed. Don't try to kind of like do it yourself if it is a intense, persistent pain. But if it is something that's a very low level kind of pain, and you find that it is something that just it's kind of there, but you would like to see if you can address it. I would actually first look at like what you're doing in the gym first and foremost, because a lot of times all these aches and pains, like I mentioned, and I don't mean to belabor this point, but it really comes down to how much recovery you're getting. A lot of times it's not so much even a case where you did something wrong or an exercise is wrong or something. It's more often a case where, hey, you're just not recovering well enough. And if you just maybe drop the volumes down on your training or all the exercise that you're doing, then you're probably fine. But let's say if you haven't even been like exercising very intensely or a lot, which let me just put that for context. Let's say if you're not exercising more than 3 times a week, okay, not more than exercising more than 3 times a week for about 45 minutes, 1 hour each time. Okay, then you're probably not exercising that much where the recovery is potentially going to be an issue. So then maybe that could be something to do with the way you're programming and the exercise that you're doing, as you mentioned, which is, oh, maybe I'm doing too much pressing work. I haven't done anything to try to work my joints in the reverse direction. So, example, if you're pressing a lot, there's a lot of general, like your scapula is kind of protracting forward quite a bit, right? It's also elevating up a little bit from that position. So then you need to do a lot of things that will pull your scapula back to kind of balance that out to some degree, to strengthen it up. Okay. I think some people will throw around ratios like, oh, you got to do twice as much back work as, I don't know, pressing work or something like that. But there's no such thing really. It's really an individual basis. Just make sure you are trying to train your body in all these different positions. There's no one position that's like bad. You can actually load pretty much all positions. It's just a matter of not not getting too egotistical about it and also not overshooting yourself and just attempting like crazy weight, for something that you've never done before. So I think that's probably the first thing, which I would recommend. Again, to summarize all that is, first of all, if you have a very persistent, very intense chronic pain, go and see a physical therapist. Don't try to self-diagnose. You're just going to waste a lot of time. You're going to get even more confused going online, trying to figure it out. Just go and see a physical therapist and try what they say. If it doesn't work after maybe 2 weeks of really being diligent with what they tell you to do, then seek another one. If you go and see a physical therapist and they tell you that, oh, you got to do all this needling and you got to do all this, like anything that's very immediate kind of relief only, basically they do it to you and you feel good and they tell you keep coming back, that's probably not the best as well. That's just a very, very short-term fix, makes you feel good for a short while. It's going to come back again, then you're going to go back to them. I know and I've seen before where, some of the therapists kind of depend on that to get recurring clients coming in, and then they almost fearmonger the clients into things where, oh, don't do this exercise, don't do the exercise, or you should actually exercise less, which technically makes it even worse for you because you're not going to be moving enough. You're not going to be strengthening up the body enough, right? Especially if you're already not doing enough. Yeah. So the key here is when you talk to the physical therapist, are they first of all understanding the nature of your pain? How does it impact you functionally? Okay, usually they will ask you, what are the things that you cannot do right now, right? Where's the pain exactly? Okay, and then how does it affect you? The other part would then be, okay, cool. Right now, we need to probably relieve the pain. So they'll do something to help you relieve the pain. It could be manual therapy, some sort of massage thing. It could be some, I don't know, ultrasound, maybe some needling, dry needling, cupping, maybe if that's what the therapies that they use. There's all these other stuff like I forgot what the scraping thing is called, IASTM, the metal scraping thing, gua sha kind of stuff.
All right, so a new year brings new experiences, and for the first time in the history of our podcast, we actually had some technical difficulty. So we're back,
Where
and
were we?
yeah, so we're back, and we just want to go through quickly where Twain was busy discussing about the questions you should be asking a trainer, or even if you just embarking on your fitness journey
Yeah.
and heading back into the gym. What are some things you should ensure that you just take care of before you really start your how should I say your main journey to ensure that you have a pain-free experience?
Yeah, so with regards to that, I think I was mentioning a lot about when you see a physical therapist, kind of what you should expect from a proper session. There's always going to be a combination ultimately of some things that they will do to you to help you quickly relieve the pain on a more immediate scale. But in the longer term, for you to go back and actually do this a little bit of rehab work and maybe some drills or some strengthening work, maybe even some changes to your program that they will suggest for you to actually get better in the long term. I think I was emphasizing earlier where there's certain therapists that I see that tend to rely a lot on the immediate relief effects and sucker people into, maybe sucker is a strong word, but to kind of get them to come back and repeatedly see them and depend on them for that relief. When actually these elements of the relief can largely be solved through long-term training and strengthening stuff.
Okay. All right, so be sure that you're getting the proper. What I found from my experience with the physios is yes, you get the ones that just come and give you the what is the what is the thing now? Not infrared, but the padding that they put on that makes your
Yeah,
muscles tingle and everything.
it can be, yeah, it can be
And
infrared, it can be ultrasound
yeah,
scans.
and then they'll see you again next week, but they don't give you any exercises to take back home. So
Yeah,
the best advice that I got is that if you are still mobile, like your arm's not broken or whatever,
yeah,
reduce your workout down to 20% of what your one rep maximum would be, and then just try and do some reps using that 20% weight so that the mobility is still there and you're still going and still progressing in it, but you're not putting too much effort on it that could actually potentially injure it further.
yeah.
All right. Yep. Talking about mobility, what are your recommendations then? Like stretching, mobility work as you get older? Would that help to also reduce any kind of these injuries or pains?
Yeah, for those aspects to doing dedicated mobility and stretching work, I would say if you are not already doing your weights and get your cardio in, those will always take top priority for the most part because even if you were sedentary and you just go immediately into stretching, you could see some improvements, but it's not really going to help you strengthen up well. Okay. So just based on that fact, I'd rather you go and do more cardio, you rather move your body a little bit more, get the system going before you even add in stuff like mobility and stretching work. Now, after you do a little bit of weights and you cross that barrier, let's say you're doing 2 times a week of weights or even 3 times a week of weights, and you are doing, some sort of cardio sessions, maybe 2 to 3 times as well in the week. Okay, cool. Now you've got a very nice baseline from which you can check with a trainer or even just ask yourself, hey, if I'm feeling a lot less mobile, what can I do to add in to increase my mobility and my range of motions? And what you find is maybe sometimes adding in, a few small sessions of mobility might help. You can do this on their own separate days where you have maybe 15, 20-minute mobility session and stretching session. I think you would probably focus a lot more on mobility, which is basically going through movement drills, taking the body through certain ranges of motion rather than actual static stretching where you sit there and you just stretch. Yeah, I would definitely advise that a bit more. Think of it as like maybe a bit more of a dynamic yoga thing if you're used to doing yoga or even Pilates, really. Yeah, so those are all really, really good options that will enhance what you're already doing on the weights and cardio side of things. But yeah, if you're not already doing that with the weights and the cardio first, attack that first, get moving first before you layer in the stretching mobility stuff.
All right, cool. I think also the weights also helps to bring some level of or increase of mobility, right? Like I can speak from my
100%.
experiences. Growing up, I could never do a proper squat. I couldn't go past
Oh yeah.
the parallel.
Yeah.
And so by working with that, doing back squats, I'm now able to go, as they say, ass to grass.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a case because mobility is simply having control of the range through a specific range of motion, right? Having the
Mm.
control through the range of motion or having strength through the range of motion. And so by that extension, if you do your weight training properly, and I would honestly say for most people, it would probably be better to think about it from more of a bodybuilding perspective. Not that I'm biased to bodybuilding, but I think when you approach it from that perspective, you think about in terms of how am I coordinating my muscles together, right? And you're thinking about the form. Where am I directing the focus and the stress as I do these exercises? And that actually allows you to enhance a bit more of that mobility component of things. Now, a lot of times people might, as a quick counter to that, some people will say, hey, but I don't want to be a bodybuilder. They look so stiff and all. You're probably looking at like maybe the top, first of all, the top professional bodybuilders that have muscle weight that's way more than what their frame actually would technically be comfortable holding. So that's already an outlier. That's not the kind of bodybuilder you're going to become in the first place because that's a dedicated thing. Okay, lifting some weights is not going to make you into that 100%. I've been trying, and I live a lot, right? And I'm nowhere near that. So, um, don't worry about being stiff from doing a lot of weight work. Yeah, if you do it correctly, you can actually be less stiff, and then you can layer in a bit more stretching mobility stuff to complement it further down the line.
Yeah, and that flexibility and mobility can actually also improve your quality of life.
Oh, 100%.
Because it opens up
100%.
more doors to you. Like I can give you an example again. The squat one now, where I can actually now do the squat properly, enables me not to worry about whether or not there's an actual toilet here when you meet. Because in Asia, there's sometimes you go and it's just a hole in the ground. And for me, when I first got here, that was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. But now I can actually navigate that quite easily.
Yeah.
All right.
It's funny.
Another question that I've also gotten previously was like, and perhaps you can elaborate, is like, what are your thoughts on using like pain relievers or anti-inflammatory medications after a workout?
Definitely, I would say do not depend on them. If you have to depend on them, there's an issue there that you have to solve. Most of the time, it will be in some sort of excruciating, debilitating pain that would require you to go and see a therapist. So if that's the case, go and see the therapist, get diagnosed, get it managed, and adjust your programming to reflect what you need to do to make that better. Okay. Obviously, work around it as well. It doesn't mean you completely rest or completely overhaul your program. You might just need to remove certain exercises, replace it with other things, or even just like Mike was suggesting just now, using really drastically reduced loads for it, but still doing the same movements. So that's the first thing. Like if you're using painkillers and stuff like that for that nature, you have a bigger problem. Okay. If it's just basic DOMS or just very intense muscular soreness, you don't want to use any kind of painkillers. Why? Because you're just going to disrupt the inflammatory process, which is part of the recovery process. And so the last thing you want to do is deny your body's the localized inflammatory response in those muscles, and prevent your body from actually adapting, right? So you're just disrupting that process. They're just going there to do the work it needs to do. Your body's going to adapt, going to condition that up. If you're still getting a lot of intense DOMs from your training, I would definitely look at your recovery side of things as well. Okay, so that's a big clear indicator you are not doing enough on the recovery side. And I think in my experience for most people, it's just you're not getting enough protein with a lot of people that I've worked with. Again, that's a very simplified take as well, just because for in the interest of time, but that's the biggest contributor I would see. There's definitely other things we could go into as well for the recovery.
But with regards to DOMs, like what do you have any like tried and tested strategies that you use to manage your DOMs?
Um,
It's like one, you say,
not
okay, yes, you must eat your protein. Two,
yeah,
now we've just mentioned quickly there, don't take any anti-inflammatory medications so that you can ensure
yeah,
that inflammatory is
yeah,
helps, right? Do you have any others? Like, should you
yeah.
walk more? Maybe if you've done leg day, should you walk more the next day to try and loosen up more? Should you rest? What are your
Actually, I'm very glad you mentioned that. Yes, there actually is. So what I recommend is uh post session, like for legs. Okay, so for legs specifically, post session you want to hop on the bike, the stationary bike, and just do like 5-10 minutes of cycling. Just do 5-10 minutes of cycling. You're not trying to cycle at a very intense pace. You're just going at a very low intensity. You can kind of feel like your muscles are pushing and a little bit, but it's like really low effort. You can chit chat with a friend that's standing next to you. Okay. What this does, right, is it seems to enhance the recovery process a bit more. And I've noticed that I don't know the actual direct mechanisms that would, we could postulate what the actual mechanisms. There's so many different ones, but I don't know which direct one is probably the one that's reducing this. But what I've noticed is just a common thing is when a lot of my clients do it, they don't get as intense of the DOMs coming in. And I actually get a lot of the newer beginner clients to do something like that. So after they do like the leg day for the first time, I said, okay, go and hop on the bike. And this is what I want you to do. Okay. And then I'll check in with you 2 days later, 3 days later, ask them, so how's the legs? Oh, there's a little bit of soreness, but actually it's not as bad as I thought it would be. I'll be like, cool, that's great. Yeah, I would say that's for like lower body specifically. For upper body, I would honestly say that most of the time for people, the DOMs in upper body doesn't impact them that as much as the legs one. So legs one, that's a very specific thing you can do. For the upper body, you could, like you mentioned, walk a little bit more the next day. Maybe as you're walking, swing your arms a little bit and that kind of stuff. But I don't really think there's anything too much you can do directly. You could perhaps take a super lightweight and do some of the same exercises for, maybe 2 to 3 sets of like really high reps with that lightweight. You're not trying to go to failure or anything, but you're just trying to like pump some blood into the area. That seems to help with the DOMs a little bit as well. Okay, so yeah, you could do that, but again, I think upper body DOMs is not a big issue for most people. So the lower body one, there's a very tangible thing you can do, which is go and ride a bike about 10 minutes, for 10 minutes after your leg session.
okay? So we'll wrap up with then. Is there any like most important piece of advice that you would give to somebody over 40 who's experiencing pain when returning to the gym?
Yeah.
What is your
And
takeaway?
yes, and that is pain-free is a myth. Um, meaning if you can accept that there's going to be some degree of discomfort in your body as you age and as you try to put it through its paces when you're training it and trying to get it better, it's going to be like a 5% thing. You're gonna like 1 to 5%. There's always this little bit of niggles and discomforts and stuff. But the key here is knowing how to manage them, and more importantly, just accepting they're part of the process makes them less impactful. So it's like, yeah, like I think too many people get stuck into the whole pain-free thing, and that's one of the biggest narratives that a lot of rehabilitative businesses try to focus on. And so they suck you in with this like promise, right, of being pain-free. But the reality is that you are never really truly going to be pain-free in the long term. I guess maybe you could be argued that if you have some really acute pain, you could go in and get that acute pain relief to a really great degree, and that's fair enough. But if you keep trying to find this pain-free or be pain-free, right? It's just like saying, oh, we can be really, really safe if I just stay in bed and don't move. Like sure, cool, we achieved that, but what kind of life is that?
True, true.
Yeah. So that's my takeaway for you guys. Having done this for a long time.
All right. So with that, we'll wrap up another episode of 40 Plus Fit. Huge thanks again
Awesome.
to Train for sharing his experiences and helping us to understand the crucial differences between good and bad pain. Remember, listening to your body is key, especially as we age. Don't
Yes.
push through the pain that feels wrong and always prioritize proper warm-ups and cool downs and recovery. And as we always say, is if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening us to. And you can also find more resources and links on our website, it's 40plusfit.com. And you can also join us on Instagram and
Yep.
hopefully soon TikTok. We'll see how it goes, where you can also chat with other 40 plus fit listeners. So stay active, stay informed, and we'll catch you in the next episode of 40 plus fit. Until then, keep moving.
Awesome. I'll see you guys. Thanks, Mike.
Ciao.